fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to the Falcoholic Lives Falcons at Seahawks post-game special. I am, of course, your host for today, Mr. Kevin Knight. You guys are familiar with me, I'm sure, on Twitter at FalcoholicKevin. And here to talk about today's game, which was surprisingly not as bad as I think many of us anticipated. The first half was, of course, pretty much, the same as we've seen basically every week up until this point. The second half I thought was fairly competitive. I mean, there were a series of mistakes that cost them the actual chance of winning this game. I mean, having to attempt multiple onside kicks to even get a shot at this is not ideal in any way, clearly. But, I thought that they did show more in this game than we've seen in several weeks. They were not blown off the field. They were not totally hopeless, at least in the second half. They weren't. The first half is another story altogether. They got a sack. Hey, so the streak without sacks is finally over. So we can kiss that particularly terrible statistic goodbye at long last. And yeah, I mean look, Matt Schaub, I thought had a good game. For what, I think the expectations were probably pretty low for how Matt Schaub was going to play. But at the end of the day, he had a great game. I mean, he kept the offense alive. Obviously, it wasn't as good as probably we would have seen with Matt Ryan. I think this is clearly with the Seahawks defense. They're not the defense, of old. They are exploitable, even by someone like Matt Schaub. I think that if Ryan was playing, the Falcons may have had a chance to win this game. Not that that really matters in the grand scheme at all. I mean, I think it's probably better off that they try to lose as many as they can, if we're being honest, to get a shot at drafting Chase Young. But, it was actually watchable, which was kind of unexpected in the second half. The Matt Schaub offense wasn't an abomination. So that was fine. I enjoyed watching Brian Hill get a chance to actually play. And as we saw, he's a pretty good running back. I mean, he didn't have a ton of opportunities necessarily, but I liked what I saw. He's a different style of runner. I think it's entirely possible that he fits Cutter's running attack a little bit better than maybe Freeman or the other guys do. But Hill had 3 carries. Obviously, he had the one big one. And I thought 2 that were decent, including the touchdown. And he averaged 9.7 with that big run. On only 3 carries, the yards per carry isn't really much to look at. But the bigger number maybe is, Matt Schaub. 460 yards for Matt Schaub, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. If you... I can only imagine the Matt Ryan haters oh look, it's Matt Schaub. I always knew Matt Schaub was actually the better quarterback, but no, I think the Seahawks defense is really just a pretty mediocre unit at best. The offensive line I thought was up and down as usual, but they did give Schaub enough time to make some plays. Julio had one of his better games of the season, certainly. The running game was still pretty poor outside of one long run to Brian Hill. Calvin Ridley got involved. We saw Russell Gage benefit from Sanu's absence with 7 catches by Russell Gage. Only 58 yards, so more of a short yardage option, but that was nice to see him. And then Jaden Graham even getting a catch. So I'm glad we're starting to see some of these younger guys get a chance in Sanu's absence. So if you guys have specific questions or things like that, throw those in the chat, because I will try to get to as many of them I can today. But, I mean, on defense, I guess anything that's not a dumpster fire, I guess, looks good to me at this point on defense, because, it's we're so used to them basically just getting blown off the turf constantly, and they didn't in the second half, and giving up 27 points is a lot, but it's not whatever the 31 or something they were, 32, 33 points per game they were allowing on average outside of this game. And it's nice to see a slightly better performance. In the second half particularly, they really limited this. I think they limited the Seahawks to 3 points in the second half. Yeah, 3 points. They gave up 21 points in the second quarter, which probably cost them the game. But after that, only 3 points allowed. That's improvement, clearly. The 2 sacks help, certainly. I think Tyler Davison has kind of shown that he was maybe the best free agent signing somehow this offseason. He's been a force, a monster against the run, you could say. Grady Jarrett with the other sack, it's almost like expected at this point because he's just the most consistent and best player, maybe on the entire defense. And I thought Kendall Sheffield, like he gave up some throws certainly, but I think his actual coverage was good. Just Lockett and Russell Wilson were just on the same page with some really incredible throws and catches there, and I think the young guy was good. But Devondre Campbell is definitely bad. That has been, I think, one of the guys that stood out in terms of struggling in this game and struggling this entire year. I'm not really sure what happened to him, and it's kind of sad because I thought he was a really, really fun part of that 2016 squad, and he's had some capable years, certainly, in Atlanta, but he's been one of the guys that's been struggling the most this season, according to PFF and, well, the eye test. It's just, as a unit, they haven't seemed to have been able to put it together at all this year. And there's a lot of places to point the finger there, whether it's scheme, lack of pass rush, guys like Vic Beasley clearly not playing up to what their expectations are. But at the end of the day, you watch this game and you think, oh, it was a solid performance, which is kind of what it was, especially for this year. If you consider this year, this may have been like the second or third best game of the entire season for them, which a loss being your second or third best game is not inspiring. But hey, that's where we are at this point. Avenging Angels, I guess you're asking what do I think the issue is with Matt Bryant. I think it's his age. Yeah. I think it's hard to keep your body in peak condition when you're, getting into your mid to late 40s. I mean, that's just basic science. Your body starts to betray you in some ways. So I don't know that it has anything to do with him not being at training camp or having preseason kicks or anything like that. I think it's just that at a certain point, the leg just gives out. You just can't kick at an NFL level anymore. And I think, the Falcons may have seen the first signs of it last year with his injuries, and then this year it seems like the accuracy is starting to suffer as well. We've seen this with Adam Vinatieri as well this year. Adam Vinatieri, another legendary kicker, having a little bit of a better season overall than Bryant. But, if you remember early in the year when we played the Colts fans were basically, Vinatieri was considering retiring the week before that game because he'd missed so many kicks to start the season. So it's just, at this age, it's just like it could go at any time. And it's sad because Matt Bryant is a fan favorite, and he's still, I would say, probably like a middling kicker, but not what we would expect, certainly, and not what we were hoping for when we brought him back. So it seems like it's likely that the Falcons are going to go in a different direction at kicker in 2020 when they probably move on from a lot of guys. T-Man, I hope we don't win anymore for that top 3 pick. Yeah, I mean, I doubt they'll lose out. I mean, I think we saw this week that they're definitely capable of like winning a game if it breaks right. But yeah, I mean, I think you could probably win, 1 or 2 more games and still get a top 3 pick when it's all said and done. Who knows if Cincy or Miami will even win a game, but I think teams like Washington, the teams like that, I think are going to win at least 1 or 2 more games. The Falcons probably will win 1 or 2 more games, at least. And I mean, the schedule the rest of the way is tough, though. So the Falcons are going to have to play some pretty tough teams. There's a lot of division games. I'm almost certain the Falcons are going to get one of the Bucs games just because the Falcons seem to kind of dominate the Bucs with Quinn at coach. Even when they've been playing poorly, they seem to sometimes find a way to beat the Bucs. So I think they'll probably win that home game against the Bucs, and then hopefully they'll win a game against the Saints. That's basically what I'm hoping for at this point. But yeah. And, you guys have mentioned it. I think we did see the team look a little bit more aggressive on defense in this game. I'll have to rewatch it to really get a better idea of like how much was actually changed, or if they just kind of mixed in some new coverages or some more blitzing or things like that. But, I thought that they were a little bit more aggressive. I thought Oliver was okay. Like I said, Sheffield I thought played well. and then they actually were able to get some sacks, which is nice. That certainly helps you limit the opponent when you can actually finish on the quarterback and not just put pressure on them. So that's always nice to see. Yeah, I mean it's been interesting to watch the kind of crux of this season. Like, they may have bottomed out already. Like, I hope that they've bottomed out. I hope that we're not going to continue to see them, go deeper and deeper into the tank, because that Rams game was very tough to watch. That Houston game was pretty bad. So I hope that we're not going to have to watch that anymore. But you never know with this team. They could come out and look just absolutely terrible in 2 weeks. That wouldn't shock me. It also wouldn't shock me if they ended up like stealing a game in 2 weeks either. Like, that's kind of their MO under Quinn, is to just be pretty unpredictable in terms of what they do. But they are very streaky. So I guess we will see what happens there. Let's see. Do you want to read some of your guys' questions here? When do I think Dan Quinn will be fired? So that, let me take a sip here of my drink before I get to that, because that is an interesting question. Because this wasn't like a dumpster fire type scenario. He probably should be fired on Monday, but I'm not exactly sure we're going to see that at this point. So give me 1 second here. All right, yeah. So I think Dan Quinn's either going to get fired this week or not until the end of the season. It could go either way. And the reason, I think a lot of owners would probably have fired Quinn this week because, they're just ready to move on. But we know Blank is very patient. He also has a lot of feelings about continuity and, respecting his staff and that sort of thing. And he may very well not want to break up the staff until after the season. We saw that with Mike Smith. He let him finish out the year. They were technically in playoff contention in that season, but by watching them, you would never have guessed that. But they technically could have won that final game and maybe had a chance at the playoffs. And of course, they got blown out. But there are a lot of rumors that the Bobby Petrino thing made Blank kind of really opposed to breaking up coaching staffs mid-season. He saw how that affected the team and how bad that was. So it wouldn't shock me if there's not a change made until the end of the year. But I also think that Quinn has played poorly enough. I mean, 1-7 at the bye week is almost as bad as you could go. And it's not like they've been nail-biter games where it's just, oh, we're just so unlucky to be 1-7. No, it's like the Falcons have legitimately looked like a 1-7 team. I mean, they've been awful. I mean, just plain awful at large swaths of time this season. So, if it were me, I think it's time to move on from Quinn. I think it's respectful to him at this point to be like, all right, it's clear that this has gone off the rails entirely. Let's just make the separation now, give you some space, and then maybe, he could get a chance on some other staff, whether that's college level or NFL level, after the season. I think if you fire Quinn at the end of the season, it's basically like you're making him radioactive. No one's going to hire someone who just got canned by another team. That just doesn't really happen. Usually they have to wait a year. So if you were to make the change now, maybe there's a chance that he's able to kind of go somewhere else next season, doing him kind of like a favor. But, I don't really, there's not necessarily a rush to do it. But, I think you also have to establish something that if Matt Ryan was 1-7, he'd thrown 1 touchdown and 7 picks. That's just it's probably a bad example, but we'll just use that as an example. He would be benched by now, right? He would be, that's in eight games. If that's your ratio, that's pretty bad. And this isn't like this is for Quinn's first season. He's rebuilding. It's all this. We've reached this stage where this is year 5 of the Quinn experience, and he's had the opportunity to build his roster the way he wants, to get the defense where he wants. He's taken responsibility for the defense entirely. He's taken over as the coordinator. He has all these pieces, everything he wanted. It's all his control, and it's failed, spectacularly. It's blown up in his face. And, I know some people think it's just the talent, the talent's so bad, but Dan Quinn picked the talent. it's him. Like, he picked these players. These are the players he wanted. These are the players that he signed and gave money to. This is his roster. Whether you blame Dimitrov for the picks or not, Quinn is very heavily involved with the selection of these players. So I just, I think that there's no way to really separate him from the poor play, and I feel like he needs to be held accountable. But at the same time, firing him now doesn't necessarily change anything in terms of what's going to happen this year. It's more of a message being sent. So if Blank wants to send the message that, we're not going to, this is really, really bad, and, we just need to make a change now. You're not doing your job. Goodbye. Then that's why he would fire him now, to send the message to future coaches that we're not going to tolerate, this type of play. I don't know if that's really Blank's style, though. We've never really seen that from him. So I guess we'll see. If it was me, I guess I would want to send that message. But, I'm just an angry fan at this point. So who knows? That's why I don't get the big bucks. Yeah, Ian McCluskey, I also would have said to promote Raheem Morris if Quinn was fired. That would be my thought on that. I would like to see Raheem Morris get that opportunity, because I don't think you promote Cutter, because he's gone almost certainly, and we've already seen what he can do as a head coach. You're not going to promote Mike Mularkey. Come on. I guess Bob Sutton maybe would have a chance, because he's kind of like an assistant head coach. But I think Morris maybe would be the guy that makes the most sense, because you get to leave Cutter at his coordinator role, and it would be more about promoting a defensive coordinator. I think that would be the more difficult decision. Let's see. I think that kind of answered your question, Mark Godby. That I do think that it will be Raheem Morris. If it were to happen, that would be who I would promote, and I'd probably go after either Jerome Henderson or Jeff Ulbrich to be the DC. Both those guys have a lot of experience here, and I think both have potential. So I would want to see what they can do. Give them a chance to show off their talents. Let's see. Yeah, get rid of Matt Ryan. All right, thanks for that one. I knew it was coming. I'm glad someone it took about 18 minutes to get it in, but I'm glad somebody got it in. Thank you. Robert Adams. So you're talking about with TD being 0-2 with coaches, shouldn't he be let go with Quinn? Shouldn't he be held accountable at some point? And I think you're right there. I don't think it's likely that Dimitrov survives this. I think that would be pretty surprising. So if it were me, I would also make the move to move on from Dimitrov as well at this point. Certainly, I don't think that keeping Dimitrov really makes a lot of sense from a lot of angles, because, like you said, he's made some. They've had 2 failed head coaches now, and your definition of failure is, I guess, didn't win a Super Bowl. So if your definition is won some playoff games, made the team competitive for a time, and then just flamed out, I guess you could say that they were semi-successful coaching hires, because they lasted several years. The team was competitive under both Smith and Dan Quinn. It just couldn't quite clear the hurdle of the Super Bowl. So I guess I would say they were semi-successful hires, but because it's pretty rare that you hire a coach and win a Super Bowl. If you make the Super Bowl your only measure of success, you're going to be a failure 90% of the time. Almost every team's a failure in that case, and that's just, you can't evaluate with that. Obviously, that's the pinnacle that you were trying to reach for, and that's what you need to evaluate as you're this is our absolute goal. But you have to have other goals too that are more reachable for the average team, because even if you're a great team, you could just get to the championship game and lose in the playoffs. That doesn't mean you had a failed season. It means that you just didn't get to the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl has a lot more to do with luck than I think a lot of people are comfortable admitting, and that's just the way it is. All right. Why do I think Julio is sticking up for Quinn? Caleb Jernigan. I think it's because a lot of players like Quinn as a coach. I think a lot of them actually do genuinely like him. And I think it's hard sometimes to separate that camaraderie and brotherhood that he's built up, which I think is real to an extent, from a failure on his part. I think for Julio, he doesn't see this as a coaching error, because the players are not executing properly on the field. If you just said that, it sounds like, oh, well, the players are the problem, right? Well, no, because if the players aren't executing on the field, why aren't they executing? That's the next question. And some of that has to do with in-season schematic changes, which have apparently confused a lot of the players on defense. The other thing is, like, maybe players aren't being played correctly in the right position. Maybe the scheme changes are not helping or making things worse. And at the end of the day, if the players aren't able to fill their roles the way they need to, that also falls on the coaching staff as well, because the coach, in this case, Dan Quinn, has roster control. So there's really no other place to point the finger at this point. But even though Quinn is probably mostly responsible for what's happened this season, that doesn't mean that the players don't like him. I think that there probably are factions of the team that he's lost, because if we're having these conversations, just fans on the street, I think that we can probably assume that the players are having similar conversations, or, more angry ones. So I think that Julio is picking up and showing us that, yes, there are factions of the team that really do respect Quinn, which is good, but it's clearly his fault at this point, at least to an extent. And as much as I respect Julio for trying to keep the team together and making a speech like that, to the team, I just think that it's nice, but it's not really. It's helpful, I guess, in some ways maybe, but I just don't think that it's really meaningful, because I think that that's what Julio's feeling, and I think that it's legitimate to an extent, but I think it's also Quinn is screwing up, so you can't let him off the hook entirely. Like, yes, the players could probably do better. Also, Quinn needs to do better too. That's just the other side of the coin there. Yeah, I mean, Cody Mercury, that's a good point. Like, if you'd think if everyone liked him so much that they would play harder and help him keep his job, but yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case, does it? So, all right, let's see. Matthew Herring, do you think Freeman could be traded before the deadline? I don't think that Freeman will be traded because of his contract. It's kind of an albatross. It's large, it's expensive, and obviously Freeman hasn't played well, so I don't really know what kind of leverage you have to trade that. He hasn't been good, he's expensive. I just don't think there's really a scenario that works out for the Falcons. If he had been playing really well to this point, probably they might have had a chance. But if you're not playing well and you're expensive, why would someone want to trade for you, I guess, is the question I always ask myself when trying to evaluate a trade. There are other reasons, like maybe you think a player is clearly not a scheme fit. I think that's certainly part of the reason why Freeman is struggling so much, because Cutter's rushing attack, I don't know how many running backs really fit in it. I mean, he's basically failed to ever put a quality running game on the field in his entire career. So I think that's certainly some of it. But, yeah, I just think cost and level of play, plus having to give up a draft pick, just doesn't really make sense for a lot of teams. All right. I know someone asked about, I apologize because I lost the name. Someone was asking about Dedrinson not being inactive, and I think I think where I'm at with that is that they do have a good defensive tackle group. Tyler Davison and Grady Jarrett are going to play the majority of snaps, it seems like, and then they have Jack Crawford to. I think at this point Jack Crawford's been having a pretty poor season, so it might be time to let Sanat play, in my opinion. But it seems like they've made the decision that they're not going to. Sanat's not. They're in their top rotation of defensive tackles, and until he breaks into that rotation or there's an injury, he's going to be inactive. As like shitty as that is for a third-round pick who has looked good when he's played, I think that's why he's inactive. I don't necessarily think there's anything else to it. I think that's the calculus that they're using for that. All right. Soler, do we have a potential out of Freeman's contract? Yes. You can make him a post June 1st cut and save a little bit of money. I know you guys have a lot of contract questions, so I'll try to get to some of the specifics of that. I know with Freeman, there are some specific things that you can do to save money with his contract. Over the cap is being weird right now. It's not respecting my authority. Okay. Yeah. So with Freeman, if you make him a post June 1st cut, you can save $6.5 million in 2020. And only you're going to have a $3 million dead cap hit in both 2020 and 2021, but you will save $6.5 million in 2020, $6.3 million in 2021, and $8.2 million in 2022. So, significant savings. Some of it is offset clearly by his price tag and his dead money, but there is some savings to be gained there. Some other like top cap casualty type players would be guys like Alan Bailey. Bailey, for instance, he doesn't even need to be a post June 1st cut. You can cut him and save $4.5 million in 2020, which is a pretty significant savings there for a guy who has been solid, I think, but he's almost certain to be cut at that point. I know folks were talking about James Carpenter, so to give you an idea, James Carpenter is basically you're breaking even by cutting him next year. You don't save much. You have $2.7 million in dead cap, and you save about $2.5 million. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, and you have to cut him post June 1st if you want to save basically much at all. Otherwise, you just eat his entire salary. But in future years, if you make him a post June 1st cut, you'll save $5.25 million in future years, 2021 and 2022, which makes a lot more sense there. I know Sombrero is another one that you can save a lot this season by making him a post June 1st cut. You can save almost his entire contract. You can save $4.75 million by moving on from Sombrero in 2020. So that's another way they can save money. Yeah, I mean, Clay Milton, I think you're definitely onto something there. They definitely adjusted the game plan for Schaub. There were a lot more of the short routes and things like that, more slants, things that the Falcons execute very, very well with their personnel. And, of course, that they're easier to execute, so Schaub was able to get those. A lot less deep stuff, which is what we were seeing a lot with Matt Ryan in the game. And they just haven't been able to hit that deep stuff because a lot of pressure and just, being a hair off. And I think what we saw this week was that the Falcons should be a West Coast style offense with this personnel. I mean, that's what they've done under Shanahan. That's what Dirk Cutter said he was going to maintain when he came here. He was going to, put his stamp on it, but, continue to do things the way we have been doing them. And of course that did not happen. And that's, I think, part of the reason why the offense was struggling, previously and has struggled a lot this season is because Cutter wants to run 4 verts and go downfield. The offensive line is not built to do that. The personnel can do that, but they're better at this West Coast style. And, he just decided that, I'm the offensive coordinator now. We're doing it my way. Tyler Russell asks, where is Quadri Olison? I don't know, man. I don't know why you spend a 5th-round pick on a running back if you're going to bench him all year. That's personally my thought on it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that's a big mistake, but that's what they're doing. And same thing with Deidre Snott. Spent a 3rd-round pick on a defensive lineman, and he's not even playing on Sundays. That could have been an edge guy, right? Desperate. We were in desperate need of edge help, and they drafted a defensive tackle in the 3rd round, and now he's inactive every week. So, hey, just yet more ammunition, to get these guys out of here. Takk McKinley, it's not really going to be feasible to trade him. I mean, someone might want him. They'll have to immediately pick up that 5th-year option, which will be very expensive if they, actually want to keep him for more than the rest of the season. But maybe that could be an option. But I don't think that he's someone they actually want to trade. I think they want to try to. I think they want to give him a second contract if possible. We've still got a few more years to evaluate that. So I think that we're going to see them, he's going to probably play out his contract. I don't think he's been as bad as Vic Beasley to where you're basically not even going to give him a chance to earn his 5th-year option or anything like that. And they don't, next year I believe is his 4th year, and then he'll have his 5th-year option year after that. So they're probably going to try to pair him with another good pass rusher like Chase Young, hopefully, and go from there with him. I don't think he's really on the trade block. Yeah, I mean, Vic Beasley needs to go. They're not going to be able to trade Vic, though. They're not. I mean, I think if they could, they would have traded him by now. They're not going to be able to get anything for him, and they're going to have to find some team willing to take his ridiculous salary, which probably not going to happen, if we're being honest. Maybe a team like, I think people mentioned the Raiders because they have a lot of cap. They really need edge help. So maybe they'd be willing to just see what happens there because they got the money, but I doubt it. And I doubt the compensation would be anything. I mean, probably like a 6th or 7th rounder at most. All right. Kubiak save us. Yeah, I mean, that'd be nice, right? That'd be real nice. But nope. We had to go back and get Dirk Cutter. Giovanni Hildreth. Do I think the Falcons make another deadline trade? If anything, if anything, it probably would be Vic. It seems like they're really desperate to trade him. It also seems like they're really not interested in trading Hooper. I think a lot of teams want Hooper, like a lot. They might be offering as much as a second-round pick for him. But I don't think the Falcons want to trade Hooper, and I think that's smart because he's a piece for your team long-term that you're probably going to make room to re-sign next year if you can. So I think, if anything, it'll be Vic, but the compensation for the Falcons will be minimum. It'll probably be a pick swap. And it's basically another team doing the Falcons a favor to get him off their books so they can maybe roll over some more cap in 2020 because they need it desperately. All right. I'm going to do one more question. And then I will, if you remember your questions, guys, and bring them to me on Wednesday, too, because we have a lot more time on those shows. I don't have quite as much time to get to all the questions on these post games. But if you come back on Wednesday night show, we'll have a lot of time to discuss these questions. So definitely keep those in the hopper. All right, let me see. I know, let's see. I want to... All right, Samuel Rowan, what positions would I go with for our first 4 picks? So I'm assuming you're asking me to rate like the need, like positions of need, because it, actually where you go with each pick probably depends on how the draft breaks and things like that. But I guess I would go after Chase Young, like an edge guy with that first pick, absolutely. That would be my first priority. Second pick would probably be a defensive back. Most likely corner, but if they, it depends on what they do, but I would probably go after a corner as our second biggest need. And then if not corner, I guess it would be like 2A and 2B. So 2A would probably be corner or a defensive back, and 2B would be a center guard prospect, someone that if Alex Mack is still here next year can play guard. And if Alex Mack is retiring, we'll need to start. So, a guy that we can get ready to go, because I think this next year is probably Alex Mack's final year. So we need to get the center to groom behind him now, let him learn for a year, and then insert him in 2021. So I would say, a center guard prospect is definitely up at the top of our list as well. And then there's a lot of tertiary needs. I think you could probably add another linebacker. I think you could add another wide receiver. Possibly if Freeman is going to be gone, you might be looking at, a late day 2 running back, something like that. If somebody falls that you really like, I think those are probably the positions that I would go for first. I think defensive tackle's in good shape, so that's not necessarily where I would go. But that's kind of where I'm at with those ones. All right, yeah. There's still a lot of time to go until the draft, so that would be one thing. But I do think they will need to add another strong safety because they don't want to play They don't want to play Neesman. Ishmael sucks, and we're in a bad spot there. So we're probably going to see Neal get a chance to come back, but they need to have another young, strong safety that they draft, preferably early on day 3 or something like that, to kind of start grooming as a potential starter. So that would be where I would also go with another one of those higher picks. Rocky Ramsey, you're welcome, man. I appreciate you guys, working with us here, even in a bad season. So thanks for the questions. Solaire, we'll be getting those draft takes on Wednesday. Don't you worry. This is we're at 7 losses now. That's what I promised. Once you hit 7 losses, it's officially draft season. So we're there. And we will be talking draft stuff all the way up until the end. And, we'll be talking other stuff, too. We'll be answering a lot of questions from you guys. And, next year's going to be pretty tight with the salary cap, so that's going to be another thing for us to kind of talk about. But we'll be working that stuff. But if you guys haven't already, please do hit that like button. As cliche as it is to say, I hate saying that. I feel like a dirty YouTube, person, but for saying that, but yeah, the likes do help us. It helps other people find the video, the number of likes in some algorithm. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, if you love Falcons content and you want to hear us talk about the Falcons, subscribing is probably the easiest way to keep up with when we have new shows coming out. Like I said, we do Wednesday night shows as well for those of you that aren't already in tune with us. and those are at 8:10 on Wednesdays, and then of course these post games as well. That's about all we've got for tonight, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate all of you. And rain or shine, win or loss, we'll be here to keep talking about this team as bad or good as they are. Until Wednesday night, though, guys, I am Kevin Knight. You can follow me on Twitter at FalcoholicKevin. Make sure you go to the site itself, thefalcoholic.com, for the internet's best Falcons coverage. We've got a terrific team over there. And if you're just itching for even more Falcons audio content, there is a post-game podcast that's going to be coming out early this week from DW and Gina and those guys who do a great job with that. So check for that as well. If you just can't hold out until Wednesday, check for that early this week on your favorite podcast platforms. Until Wednesday, guys, have a great week. Enjoy the rest of your football Sunday, and I will see you then. Have a good night.